Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Predictive Analytics Podcast. Rhys Tiller, the one and only guest, David Dodds. David, how are you?
Oh, outstanding, guys.
So I still remember that August of 2007 call I got from David Dodds to join the Football Guys staff, which I had to wear an old sweatshirt from those days. David, how has this year gone for you?
It's been good. I mean, it's interesting because I think, internally a lot of us knew a while ago. And so just, knowing, okay, I'm going to probably let the cat out of the bag this week. So this week has been kind of emotional, but just, yeah, for the most part, it's just been, I mean, it's family, this is just, I mean, I could have kept doing this for probably ever, but it's like, on the same token, it's like, it's ready for another group of people to kind of run this thing. And, but yeah, it's a bit emotional. I mean, there's been a lot of sweat equity in this product, and hard to ever say you're gone, you're leaving.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So how long have you owned Football Guys then?
Yeah, I started playing fantasy football, I think, of the very first Fantasy Index magazine. I believe that was 87 or 88.
Wow.
So it had Jerry Rhys on the cover. We tore out they had a rule sheet right in the middle of it. We just tore out the rule sheet, photocopy for everybody. That's how we played. It was like back in the day, it was no PPR, it was just like touchdowns and field goals, right? And then we started adding rules. That was an engineering league. And then I would say like 3 or 4 years after that, I'd already created my Mr. Football website, launched it. Joe and I connected. I ended up joining his cheatsheets.net team, and then we eventually rebranded that as Football Guys. So I've been at this 30 some years.
Wow.
And then 25 plus with Football Guys.
You mentioned touchdowns being the only ones that matter, but that's pretty much all that matters in the actual game too.
Yeah, kind of true. I mean, it's pretty true. Like if you ever have one of those weeks where you played all your guys and didn't score any touchdowns, you didn't win. I mean, right? You better still score touchdowns. I mean, the PPR and everything can help you get closer, but those guys have to finish and cross the line. But back in the day, I remember like the Bardells of the world that would have their 12 touchdowns, and like these guys literally had no role except the vulture touchdowns on the 1 yard line. And they were just some of the most valuable people to draft. It was funny.
And now we look at it backwards and with the backwards lens and think, man, analytics would have told us that's not repeatable year over year. But, we didn't know back then.
Right. Yeah, absolutely true. Well, it was funny too. Like, I mean, I'm sure you played it then too, Jeff, when the guys like Barry Sanders, of course you draft Barry Sanders, but he never scored that many touchdowns.
No.
So in leagues that were predominantly touchdown based, guys like Barry Sanders weren't all that valuable, but you're looking and going, this guy is one of the best to ever play the game. There's something wrong. And I think that's why some of those formulas and all those different changes in scoring started happening to really balance out to favor the real talent in the league.
You don't get points for highlights.
No,
not usually.
Not tackles missed, but also
for highlights.
David, you remember those days when all the debates of Barry versus Emmett, who was better, and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Oh, it's all come full circle. I mean, I think it's funny. I mean, there's not many arguments you hear. And even though we have a way more analytics and everything, which is great, but it's still mostly the same arguments. Running backs don't matter, quarterbacks don't matter, defenses don't matter, right? It's all the same story. It's like, no, all those things kind of matter, but there's times when they don't seem like they matter.
And everything's cyclical, right? I mean,
right, absolutely. It's this will be next year, like next year's draft. Can you just wait for the redraft when like every rookie is going in the second round, everything, because all these rookies are exploding, and that's not right, but yeah, it's completely cyclical.
Oh, and it's crazy. So before Rhys jumps in his questions, I wanted to publicly thank you for all your service and bring me on to Football Guys. And so those that have been on Twitter know that David's been getting shout outs from all the staff for writing kind cards, very kind, and a letter about his time, and then send us all swag, including the hat that Rhys has on and a cool hat that I won't let him put on. But
I got you.
David knows what John I'm talking about. There's a cool hat and
splatter paint.
Yeah. And but it has been emotional, David. I mean, it's hard to imagine Football Guys without Dodds' projections and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you almost got to go way back to the real start of like when Joe and I, and we put together a team of all people that had slight presence. There wasn't really much of an industry at all. But I think the point was always for football guys, hence the name and everything, was to create kind of that water cooler talk where you just get a whole bunch of people passionate about this. And like no one take is above someone else's take, but hey, state your case, throw it at me. Come on, come at it. And we'll all get smarter through this by you sharing your take and somebody else. And so in that regard, I mean, I think we just kept adding people. We just kept doing more stuff because it just made logical sense. It's like, this is a giant umbrella. And then certainly as fantasy football just grew in popularity, and there was back in the day, I mean, if you were on ESPN and you said the word fantasy, you were never invited back, or NFL Network, you're never, there wasn't a network, but you're just on any of those kind of NFL basic shows and started talking analytics, like you could just see your way out. And then we just seen all that come around. And now you've got this complete robust Twitter, as well as just, zillions of sites out there covering tons of different niche aspects of the whole thing. It's fantastic to watch it, because it's like, I think Joe and I's dream was always to create this water cooler talk. And I feel like we achieved that. I mean, I feel like I'm stepping down, but it's like, who's going to do this? The Football Guys has like 50 people. And it's like, if there's a hole, you're going to go get somebody else to fill in those. I mean, it's always ever changing in terms of the personnel and how you do it. And it'll continue to grind and hammer and have all the best stuff, just because that's what it is.
No, but you'll be missed. Don't think otherwise. So Rhys is 15, and people do not believe me that Chase Stewart was not much older than him when he joined staff. Is that true?
I think he was 16. We weren't entirely sure. I'll tell a funny story with all this. It's pretty funny. So there's a little point in time, I don't know how much I should say this, but there was a point in time where we were a free website. We were looking to go pay the 1 year. So we had cheat sheets. We rolled over to Football Guys. We had another whole year free, and all the writers and stuff were just earning credits. And the point was, in year 2, we would charge a subscription, and we try to pay people back for all that time. But it was kind of a completely unknown business plan. Like, is this going to work or not work, or kind of crazy. And there's some heavyweights in the industry. One of them being Bob Harris had Joe's ear, and he's like, I don't care how big your free mailing list is. If you sell 4,000 to 5,000 subscribers, you should be happy. And like, Joe's doing the math and going, well, 5,000 subscribers are out of business, right? This isn't going to work. And Joe was getting some cold feet. Like, he was running a boat business. He had some other businesses with his dad. It was taking a lot of his time for something that looks like it's going to fail. And Joe stepped away. Joe literally said, I'm out, and kind of handed over the reins to me. And I said, well, okay, you're out, but I'm not going to say you're out, because, we're trying. This was the year we're going to sell subscriptions. And so we were in, I don't know, June, July timeframe. And it's like, we're just a couple months away from selling subscriptions. What if Bob's wrong? What if we sell a whole bunch of subscriptions, right? So I'm not saying anything, but we reached out and grabbed some people. And one of those people I grabbed was Chase Stewart, because he was just hammering on the boards, but he was this brash kid, this New York Jets fan. And he had these just outlandish, crazy takes, but it was clear the kid could write. And I didn't really know his age at the time. Anyway, long story short, I hire him during this period of time. He's like 16 years old. I find out no sooner do we get him on staff. But all of a sudden he changed. Like, this brash, crazy guy in the message boards, he's writing these thoughtful, super thought-provoking articles, not, creating no havoc and wave. And it's like, wow, that was so great. But, we had reached out to guys like Greg Kellogg, who were, part of the first, fantasy sports writers Hall of Fame. He started helping us write the update. Everything is like, we just were piecing together all these things, and we're just still kind of signing it as Joe Bryan for a little while, as we bid some time to kind of see what would shake us. Long story short, we did end up debuting with 18,000 subscribers that year.
Wow.
One. So, August starts coming around, the subscriptions start coming in, and Joe starts peeking in more. He's like showing up on the message board and this. And I remember writing pretty vividly a note back and said, man, we left the lights on. You want back in, because this thing's about ready to be something special. So I never really felt like he'd went away, but I think anybody else would have not even known that story. Like, we weren't sharing it with staff. This was pretty much known to me. And it's like, I'm not announcing this until our selling window is over, because I mean, we might not sell anything if Joe's not with us. So anyway, long story short, he's back. He took a 5-week siesta, and you know, the rest is history. We kind of built it from there. But it was like I said, I mean, this was the Wild West, man. There was no real business models of anybody making this work. Like, the internet was free. Like, what do you mean you're going to charge for something on the internet? You're crazy. That is never going to work. Not when I can go and get everything else for free. It's like, yeah, we're doing some cool stuff though. Yeah, but it's free over here. It's like, no, there really wasn't anything that we were doing that was cool. It's like, dude, if you want something cool, you got to pay for it, and we're going to make it pay. So, like I said, we followed our hearts, our business model. Still had a huge component of free, and we still do that to this day. You know, the site runs free until around July 15th, before we then start putting a ton more stuff behind the paywall. But for the most part, we followed our dreams, our business plan, and it, you know, knock on wood, was right for the right time, I guess.
And you talk about full circle. Now there's a lot for free, and people are like, "Why should I pay for it?" You know, and,
right? It's completely full circle now, because, well, and the thing is, what's funny is when I first started with Mr. Football, completely free site, but that was also when the first internet boom. The Rhys isn't going to understand this, but the first internet boom came, and it was just crazy. I mean, you can't even. It's hard to describe to kids now to even understand it, but it was crazy because these venture capital people just thought, oh my goodness, the guy owns pets.com. It's going to be huge. And they were just throwing money. So they literally wanted to have banners like everywhere there was an internet. So they would look and go, oh my goodness, this Mr. Football, I don't even know what they're doing, but we got all kinds of eyeballs. Guy gives me a call. Next thing you know, I've got a $50,000 check coming my way. Throw some banners up on your site, do some stuff, promote pets.com. It's like, yeah, dude, I'll do what I can. There was no rules. There was no nothing. There was no structure. There was no business plans. There were no contracts. There were just people sending mail, trying to get their word out about their website. And then all of a sudden the .com boom died, when all of a sudden, like, hey, wait a minute, shouldn't some of these companies be making money by now? And some, you know, real financial people started looking at numbers and saying, wow, this is kind of crazy. And they started ratcheting that stuff down. Well, the pets.coms failed. All of a sudden there was no advertising money. And then, you know, things like subscription sites, people were looking for a way to keep what they were rolling. But you know, the Mr. Footballs of the world, the KFFLs of the world, the Huddle, all those websites were mostly predominantly free, just getting internet crazy dollars thrown their way for just being first movers in the space. Totally nuts, totally wild world. And
yeah, oh man.
So yeah, but you're absolutely right in terms of full circle. I mean, you're seeing now just tremendous amount of things happening on the free side. Zillion's a great podcast. Zillion's a great video cast. Just everybody releasing a lot more information for free as well. And the pay component's even greater. You know, there's even more of those sites as well.
Oh yeah.
So you mentioned one, but what are some of the most memorable highlights from football, guys?
Your tenure, I guess.
Yeah, man, there's so many things. I think the thing I literally lived for every year was, we called it the Vegas retreat. It didn't matter if it didn't matter where it was at, because it's funny, we'd go to Vegas and then we'd all stay there during all the games. It's like none of us went gambled or anything. Yeah, we did Vegas, which is the easy way to have a cheap house and hang out with a bunch of. But because I think before that, like especially the early retreats, it was just a bunch of guys that we all knew via email and stuff. And then all of a sudden you put a name, that name turned into a face. And then you found out about their family and about their real life and their real jobs. You know, these are all secondary jobs. And just really got to know all the different people. And so to me, that brought the humanity back to football guys. Like, yeah, we're always getting along and we're doing all cool stuff. And whether we're doing it through Basecamp or Slack or email, but just that face-to-face time, I couldn't get enough of it. I mean, almost always I'd come back. I couldn't talk anymore. I mean, I lost my voice.
Oh, yeah.
No sleep, you know, get 2 hours of sleep a night, just because I mean, just those moments with the guys were just incredible. There's no words for it.
So David would stay up all night picking people's brains. In the last few years, it's probably more DFS focused, but
Right.
but just picking people's brains. So help me understand, what were you thinking? You know, but you're right though, because especially with right, this is not a shocker, but all the football guys staff were paid to have strong opinions. And so you put us all
Right.
together and we all have strong opinions, but we have a relationships with one another. And so we know how to take one
Right.
another. It's kind of like the DFS group with John Lee and Devin. Those two are
Right.
hysterical together. And
Right.
but anyway, I really enjoyed. Now I'd say this: there were some mansions that we stayed at, some very
Correct.
nice houses.
Correct.
People don't realize these are like 10-bedroom houses, two right next
Correct.
to each other.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Because for to me it was more, we had to keep everybody together. Like those early years, we sometimes had houses that weren't together, and then we
Yeah.
kind of, you know, take a car and bus people. It's like we need everybody together. Well, it's like you start having 40 people attend something, you gotta have something pretty big. So it's like, well, let's just start looking at let's look at the castles, let's look at the mansions, let's look at the mansions that are next to each other. And yeah, it kind of grew from there. But it wasn't that hard of a discussion with Joe. I remember those early years, like, wow, that's a big expense to do this. Because in the early years, we paid for everybody's plane tickets. I literally bought all the food. As it got bigger and bigger, I mean, we still obviously paid for the food and the place to stay, and we usually started giving stipends. So maybe that did or didn't cover it for all people. But it was a giant expense in those early years. But again, I just think that's the humanity piece. I think if you don't have that, you're just working, you know, from a Zoom call, and it's like you can't do that forever. You literally can't do that forever.
Yeah, especially with 50 of us. I mean, people don't realize even back then there were 35 or 40. And we mentioned Chase earlier, but you know, Chase is always with the shtick of the Jets. Oh yeah, I think they're winning the Super Bowl next year. You know,
Right.
and
Or are they going to win it next year?
oh, I don't think so.
No.
I'll take the under. But,
yeah, but that was what was always fun, Jeff, is that we had so many different people from so many different states. We'll have a Pittsburgh contingent and a Philadelphia contingent and a Dallas contingent, and Morrill and I like the Chargers. And so it was kind of nice, like no matter who was like in the playoffs, we had somebody rooting hard for them. Like there was some super fan within our community of liking some of those teams. And that just made it pretty fun. I mean, I remember there was times like, I forget one of those early years. I think it was the Bordello house, and your son will like this. So Bordello is basically a, prostitution house back in the day, or so we looked up on the internet later. We didn't know that when we rented out, but it was two homes like connected in the middle, and like you're going, and you look at every other house in the neighborhood and going, like, it looks like they just combined the parking lot, like the two driveways, and then it made no sense because there was two of everything, but there was this middle sideway. It's like, what's the history of this? So Sigmund starts looking up the history, and sure enough, it was some big raid of a Bordello house that they just, had beds everywhere. I don't want to guess what that we're all doing, but we rented out because it obviously had 11 bedrooms or some crazy thing like that. But I remember back in the day, it's like, I mean, the Pittsburgh fans were so excited. They just didn't want anybody that wasn't rooting for Pittsburgh. So there were people who were watching on two separate TVs. Like if you weren't rooting for Pittsburgh, you weren't allowed to be in this room to watch the game, because we just wanted nothing but pure joy when we scored a touchdown. So stuff like that. It's just, but like I said, I think those are my fondest memories. And then just, I think seeing things come to light, like you have a vision. We've had so many of them along the way, but I mean, I remember early on when I really wanted to get what I called forward numbers. Now it's, rest of season rankings. Everybody does that stuff now, but I had that vision early on. It's like, well, we do great projections, but what if we did forward projections for the week forward? Then you can manipulate that against any scoring system. You can scan for any combination of weeks based on strength of schedule. And you can just do all of this math behind the scenes to really do all this other stuff. And, I feel like we were in front of all that for everybody. It took us a while to find our app guy, but we were in front of wanting to do the apps and deliver those things. Once we found that guy, we were hard movers in that space. But then, I mean, let's face it, we jumped out and teamed with the FFPC in the, the Football Guys Player Championship. When that started, that had a $50,000 grand prize. It now has a $500,000 grand prize. There's almost 11,000 teams paying $350 a team to be part of the Football Guys Player Championship. I mean, that's a mark on the space. I mean, that's, almost a $3 million prize pool.
Wow.
Just in crazy, right?
Yes.
For the game of fantasy football. And it's just, so I don't know. I mean, there's been so many memories along the way, but just definitely the people, anybody that came to the retreats, it felt like we got to know each and every one of those individually. It was outstanding.
Oh, especially like, not to throw some of these, the in and out runs, the Clayton and David coming back after a Costco run with hordes of groceries. Like you have to think there's 40, 50 dudes there, right?
Yeah, there was times, there was one of those years we actually bought some of the Secret Santa prizes and stuff too. But I want to say one of the Costco bills was like $4,000. You come out of the Costco spending $4,000 with just flats of meat, and it was just crazy. Like this is absolutely crazy, but it's just 3 days worth of fun and awesome.
I think that's what happens when you put 40 guys together in two houses.
Oh, yeah.
To each other.
Correct. There's a lot of brats, there's a lot of beer, there's a lot of water, there's a lot of Gatorade. It was funny because I remember early on saying, we need to get some Gatorade. It was like, people are gonna drink beer or water. And then every year we just up the Gatorade. It's like, yeah, we're playing basketball or do something. There was like tons of Gatorade being drunk. And so yeah, it's funny.
That plus Red Bull. And you brought up Secret Santa. You brought up the Secret Santa. So I have two memories of the Secret Santa.
I have one.
Well, hang on. That'll live with me. One of them is Morrow putting the chip, the casino chip in the big thing of mayonnaise.
That was me. Actually,
You did it.
I did it. He went in there and reached in to grab it. Yeah. Yeah. Mayonnaise circled through a few times. Remember, we also had the mayonnaise. It was pretty funny. There was a series of envelopes, and there was one that had $300, and all the other ones had $1 in it. So basically, if you took one scoop of mayonnaise, your first one to eat, you got to draw an envelope. But if you missed, the next guy up would have to take 2 scoops of mayonnaise to do an envelope. Luckily, it was hit after 2 because we're like, wow, that's just going to get crazy. And everybody was lined up to do it. It's like, there's $300 in there. It's like, man, there's no amount of money I'm gonna eat mayonnaise for. It's like, but
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Actually,
So
$300 I might.
There was just the Secret Santa just became a life of its own. I mean, the rules would change every year because I was in charge, and
Oh yeah.
but that's what just made it super fun. It was like an end of a season. In this early days, we were putting iPads and other fun stuff and sweetening the pot, but other people were just generously giving cool gifts. But then everybody would give a really goofy gift as well as a really good gift. So I mean, your odds, a little better 50%, but I mean, there were just some hilarious duds. And then certain people, I remember the one year where Aaron Rodnicki, he drew like 4 or 5 times. Every single time got a dud. Didn't matter if it was a big package, a little bit. I mean, he always drew the dud. And it just gets funny. And yeah, just good times, man.
He had a shower cap, I remember, and something else.
Pimp glass.
Oh yeah, it was so funny. The other thing I remember is what happens if you put a bunch of fantasy like numbers guys in a room with this. They start calculating how much expected value is still out there on the gifts.
It's so ridiculous on the envelopes and everything else.
Yeah.
They're like, he said there was this much, and I think that word means this. There's this many envelopes. Yeah, exactly. How much each of the envelopes are now worth, and totally crazy. And it's just like, and then he's like, oh, what's the real count? It's like, Moral's like, hey, I'm not giving you my count, but I think it's about $34 an envelope.
Oh yeah.
It's like, yeah, absolutely, super funny.
I can never do Secret Santas again without trying to think of the estimated value of each package now.
I'm just telling you, that's what happens. And
that's what happened. You get it right.
I also remember somebody losing a bet and jumping in the pool.
There were. So we, like in the DFS years, or the early DFS years, we would always have generally a FanDuel contest. So you could enter it. The winner got something, but the loser, the person that took dead last, he had to jump in the pool. And in the middle of winter, and Vegas sounds hot, but in the middle of winter, it's not hot. So it's like about 30-some degrees in the pool. Not chip off the ice cubes. Yeah, very cold.
Oh yeah.
Aaron cut out that one year that he was the loser. He cut out, jumped on a plane. So we forced James Rimicon, who took second to last, to jump in just because.
One of the things we do, David, is whenever we're traveling, we hit up these guys. So we've seen James and Harstad, and when we were coming through your neck of the woods, it just happened to be the week that Morrow was going through treatments down in Southern California. But I really enjoy seeing all the football guys' staff, as we travel.
Absolutely.
It's kind of a cool thing.
So
Definitely.
what's next for you now?
I can't specifically state. So I got till end of this year to close out all the books and everything kind of with Joe. So we're, that takes us through kind of the Super Bowl. I'll be making some kind of announcement probably around March. But something, the brain never stops. So it's hard for me to just end it. And it's so funny because I've got enough money. That hasn't been driving me for a long time. So it's not about money. It's not about anything, but it's like anything. I mean, people that have kind of a creative voice, they just have projects, they have things. I got a binder full of things. We're going to tackle some of those. So, and some of those were just really not really possible under the Football Guys brand. So nothing to do with, differences or division or anything, just things that really I want to kind of do outside of the Football Guys brand. I mean, we like the Yoko Ono greatest hits kind of thing. Like, I mean, obviously the Beatles, they never really got to the Beatles again, but John Lennon had his own projects he wanted to do and similar. I mean, I have just some things I want to do, so unfinished, and some giving back to this hobby too. I feel like, I took for a longest time, but I got a whole lot of ideas of just things where hopefully I can give back as well. So
you're welcome back on this podcast anytime.
Okay, yeah, absolutely, man. This has always been fun. Yeah, it's just that I look at Rhys and this is cool. I mean, the fact that you're into it this hard, hammering through analytics, the fact that you use the downtime to write a book and market a book and jump on podcasts, create your own pod, just fantastic. And
to be fair, a lot of that was Dad, especially the marketing.
Okay.
As I'm not allowed to have Twitter, so I can't exactly market it to anyone.
Young for Twitter, son.
Not according to Jeff Hasley.
Hasley's over there like, well, he's 14. He can be on Twitter. And I'm like, man, I see stuff on Twitter that makes me feel like I got hit in the stomach. Oh.
Right. But no, I think that's what I think's interesting about all of this is just we're seeing, all these fresher faces and all these other new takes and there's space for the dinosaurs too. Like you say, like the dinosaurs are going to be there next year going, you guys are a little crazy on the rookies here. I'm just saying, some of us have been through this a year or two. They don't all hit like this. Like every receiver that gets drafted in the first round isn't a gold mine, right? It's usually not the case. But I think it's good. I think it's well grounded, and it's just the world gets more and more analytics with all of these next gen stats and all the player trackers, and just as we just all get smarter, right, and figuring out what worked and didn't work. It's exciting. I think where this is going. I mean, I've got some things I'm ready to debut that I think I'll also surprise the world. It's just a different way to skin the cat. And again, you see this for the longest amount of time, and you start to kind of work things through your own head of saying, is that really how we should project? Is that really how we should forecast? Is that really how we should pick players and choose things? And so, again, hopefully I can leave my mark and keep, the youth of this country to also just see, hey, what about this or this? And it's just, you're either continuously learning or you're out. And I think what's been nice about fantasy football is I think it's been continuously learning. It just seems like there's more and more and more people doing great things in this space, and it's fantastic to watch.
Yeah, so we've really enjoyed getting to know a lot of different people, in the space, different person every week, and it's been great.
Do you see yourself in the fantasy world again?
That may be part of his question.
Yeah, I do. There's some unfinished business here, so I do.
Hopefully it's good unfinished business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and like I said, I think anybody that ever leaves and kicks the door or is dismissive, it's like, you own your own history. And it's like, I mean, I'm super proud of what I've done at Football Guys, but yeah, there's other things I want to do, other projects I want to do within this space.
Yeah, and the other thing, and so I was self-employed with a partner for 16 years, and I can only say, and I'm speaking of my own, I'm not projecting onto you, David, but when it's just me and I'm able to be more maneuverable, more nimble, be able to look at things different, and you're not bound by the history of something, it just gives you a different outlook. And it's not good, it's not bad, it's just different.
Correct. Yeah, and I think the reality too, and I mean, I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way, but it's like, Football Guys grew in size, and now we have a staff of 50 people, and the bills that come in are extensive. The mailing list software you have is extensive. The servers are expensive. The whole infrastructure that has to be maintained. Well, you now are living to those kind of rules as well. So just this, oh, I want to be creative, I want to do this fun thing. It's like, well, no, that's not paying the bills. It's not getting the hit count. We got to drop the pages. You got to start making a lot more business decisions. And we've done a lot of those in terms of advertising. And so this year, it hits really hard. I mean, you get COVID, no one wants to advertise. All those dollars go away, but you just all have the staff, you care about staff, you need to make all that work. Those are the pieces I've never enjoyed about this business. I mean, and most companies probably don't either. I mean, I like to sit down, grind out cool stuff, launch it, do it, wow the world, or everybody says that was stupid, move on to the next cool thing. Right. But we have to do a lot of those things. We do a lot of hand holding. We make sure a lot of our customers are happy using the tools and this. There's the documenting of the tool. It's like, dude, I want to create the tool and move on, right? I mean, I don't have time to write the manual for it. It's like, hey, I figured it out. They can figure it out. And I know that's not realistic, but it's how a lot of creative people think, right? I don't enjoy writing the manual on how to do it, how to get the most out of it, how to set your DFS optimizer to mag. It's like, I've already figured that out. I'm on to the next piece. So it's just, I think it's, like I said, I think Football Guys is a machine. It generates a tremendous amount of money, supports a ton of people, and is just doing fantastic work. But I think that machine's logically in place. It's not going anywhere. I mean, the two easiest pieces to get rid of Football Guys were Joe and I. So I stepped away. I don't think there'll be a blip. I think Football Guys will thrive on, but this will allow me creative space to do the things that I feel like I've wanted to do for a while. That binder's getting thicker, and I'm going to get those done. And like I said, I just as easily can people go, wow, that's really dumb. Like, what was he thinking here? But on the same token, I mean, follow my instincts led to a whole lot of the things that are happening good at Football Guys. I'm pretty sure I got a few tricks up my sleeve coming forward. So we'll see how that all shakes out. And like I said, the goal isn't to have a better site than Football Guys. I don't think that's really possible. I doubt I even come close to trying to have 50 people on it. But I do got some ideas, especially as the world's moved to like best ball stuff that I got all kinds of ideas there. And so we'll see how this all shakes out and plays out. Like I said, I can't really say too much. But little siesta's probably in order. I've put a lot of years in. But it's just flesh out a lot of these different things. So we're probably, if I am in the fantasy space again, I'm predicting June 2022. So won't see much of me in 2021, maybe a blog, but just really flesh out a lot of these concepts that are in my head. Still too young to get out of the game.
You're way too young. Way too young.
Yeah.
So what's been the biggest change in fantasy football that you have seen over the past 10 years?
I mean, I think things like the whole idea of, like, when it first started, it really was just touchdowns, and then there was like very little tweaking of changing of real scoring system that kind of neutralized pretty fast when people added PPR. But then what we've really seen is the whole idea of flex, super flex, league size, and just all those things tweak it, right? I mean, all those things, and it's almost like as soon as somebody would kind of figure it out, let's add super flex, let's make it this, let's do this, right? Let's change all of these different things to kind of make it fun, to make it new, to make it not as exploitable. Because what you don't want to get to, and Football Guys is kind of guilty of that too. I mean, we're so good at projection, we're so good at forecast, we're so good that the artificial intelligence just takes over. It's like, I only just clicked on the Football Guys bot, it set all my lineups, did all my trades. What's the fun in that, right? I mean, the fun is, twisting your brain to try to figure out not only this week's value, but future value of that player and how to manipulate that. So even though we've done a great job and done more of those kind of tools and those things, like, I don't really think anybody really wants that. I think that's why the rules keep changing and all those things. Is like, I don't want the AI world to take it over. Like, I think the AI world pretty much destroyed DFS. Like, the early years of DFS was fun, and now it's, I've got my Monte Carlo simulation generating 10,000 lineups, and because of percent owned, I want to be on these. It's like, that's cool and all. I mean, you wrote all this code, did all this crazy stuff of how you want to attack the game, but it's just, did you really take a stance, or when you put 150 lineups in against this optimized strategy, it paid off? You know what I'm saying? It's like quant to, times a million, but I just don't know that it's better. Like, is that more enjoyable, or is it like when you're forced to like really set a lineup? So a lot of innovative things coming out that have come out. I don't know if you guys played the guillotine leagues at all with Paul Charchian.
No.
Fantastic concept, and I'll just something that's common sense thing, that you start with 17 owners, totally crazy. You draft for 14 rounds, and literally each week the bottom team is gone, but all their players get dropped back in the pool. So like, well, that guy took Patrick Mahomes, and that guy took Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, those are the kind of guys on your free agent list, but everybody has a free agent dollar to bid on. But obviously, you kind of would love to squeak by. So all of a sudden that free agent money is worth a ton more later in the year, but you can't ever get yourself cut. So it's always just trying to be good enough. It's kind of the anti-best ball, which is draft it, never have to look at it again. It's constantly tweaking to constantly get a little better team to not get eliminated, but always manage to be on the right side of the free agent pool money. So when you get to the end weeks, and it'll go down to 4 teams and then you just play it out, there's no more moves, but that you can pick up. Like this week's team lost Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson. I mean, this was a dream team of just players that are now on the free agent thing. And like, who's bidding to get those guys, and how do you forecast that? So it's also a strategy where you're planning for those playoff weeks really, really hard. Like, even if you can build a good enough team that can coast, how's this team going to make it through the buys? How's this team going to be in the playoff contention when all the money's down? So just interesting things like that are just absolutely crazy new concepts. I'm all for it. The crazier, the better. I think that stuff's awesome.
Those do sound like a lot of fun.
I'm in a dynasty league that's similar, run by Ryan McDowell. It's called the Kitchen Sinks, and it's Devi, it's Superflex, it's
long-term contracts. I mean, all that stuff is super fun, right? Super fun.
And it's challenging brain power, right? Because everything's worth something. How do you value it versus the next guy value, and this versus that?
Right. Like, what's your picks worth compared to what they're worth to you now? And depending on where you're at in that cycle, like, am I trying to win now? Am I trying to win 2 years from now? Am I trying to win a year from now? Right. I mean, depending, that's your value changes too. So yeah, stuff like that. I think anything that's doing those kind of things is fantastic. And I will even say just some of the stuff that we introduced. I mean, some of our like football guys contests.
Yeah.
Hard, right? It's like, wow, that's not much money, but you're realizing, dude, I want a lot of these guys and I'm running out of money and I can't, what do I do? Right. I mean, just how do you balance those cut lines with the bye weeks and it's hard. I mean, when you really try to break those down, and it's amazing when you hear from some of our subscribers, like, yeah, I made the top 100 the last 3 years in a row. It's like, how? It's so hard. That's such a hard contest. And it's not luck. I mean, it's when they're doing it at that level, they're breaking it down and they're trying to really figure out where they're getting their points each week. I mean, they have to be somewhat lucky on injuries and things, but still pretty amazing.
The playoff one's hard, I think, even more difficult because it only takes the top 2 scores from each team. So you can't
until the end. And then you need everybody at the end, but you can't really carry too much dead weight or you never get to the end. Yeah, it's crazy.
Oh yeah.
But you talked about like innovation, making the game more fair. I think one of the biggest examples of that is Superflex. Because as we got smarter, we realized we could just wait till a quarterback and get a Ben Roethlisberger who could end up being a QB1 and wait and try to accumulate everything. But with Superflex, now quarterbacks are worth something like they are in the game. It requires a little bit more strategy than just wait until the 14th round.
Yeah. Absolutely. It just even you're even seeing it, just in terms of within Superflex. It's like we've seen so many quarterbacks go down. It's that people aren't used to this because it's a typical year. You might lose 2 or 3 quarterbacks. We've lost so many this year.
Yeah.
So similar to when people would always have all these backup running backs waiting for them to go down. It's like, well, you're in Superflex leagues. You better have had positional, been on the right side of that the weeks before you had to bid all your cap to get them in waiver, right?
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, those things, I think those things are always really, really good for the game. Changing in the scoring. And I think that's one of the things we embraced about our early run and working with the contest group, the FFPC guys. I mean, they were given a 1.5 reception for tight ends, which seemed crazy at the time, but it all of a sudden it's like, it elevated those guys to in those middle of rounds, whereas like people would literally just not take them. You wouldn't take a quarterback, you wouldn't take a tight end. Well, then we're just taking all the same players. But all of a sudden now, Travis Kelce is a first-round pick in that kind of scoring system at 1.5 PPR, and not a bad pick, like a safe pick at 1.5 PPR. So, and then you get into the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. I mean, it's just a ton of those guys that you kind of want to not be on the wrong side of a horrible tight end, right?
Oh yeah.
And then their IL idea of dual flex, I love the idea of just more and more flex positions. I just think that just adds a whole different variable to how to play the game. That's hard to crack, hard for the AI guys to crack. We've done our best, but it's hard to crack.
Agree.
Well, for NFL, you're essentially playing a quarterback in 5 flexes. Isn't that kind of what we should be doing in fantasy? Because fantasy football is based off of the real football.
Right.
And you don't, I mean, most teams roll out 3 wide receivers, tight end, running back, or two running backs,
Right.
wide receivers, tight end. But really, you only see guaranteed a quarterback on the field.
But
Usually wide receiver 95% of the time. But
Right.
still, you should have plenty of flexes.
I remember
Because
those years. Do you remember when you had to like map out and tell like how you were gonna run? You were gonna run wishbone, or you're gonna run
yes.
this? You remember some of that, Jeff? That kind of said that. It's like, so when you drafted, you had to declare your team strategy, which was pretty crazy, but it was pretty interesting. I mean, I've seen all kinds of deviations from that. I think the thing is fantasy football kind of started with this whole starting 2 running backs, because when you only had, especially in 10-team leagues, not quite as bad in 14, 16, those bigger leagues, but in 10 teams league, if you only had to play 1 running back, the game's just too easy, because it's just so easy. It's easy to get super deep receivers that on a given matchup week, the guy's, going against, he's got 5-6 inches on that corner.
Right.
It's easy just to find that guy that just slots in, that's good enough to make it work. So like the 2 running backs forced everybody to kind of get running backs early. I agree with you on Superflex. The other thing I liked with quarterbacks, I liked actually the leagues that went 6 points for all quarterback touchdowns, regardless of passing and running, because it just creates that differential. And of course, now the quarterback scores a bunch. So yeah, but the differential isn't great. Yeah, but do you really not want to have that guy that doesn't score 30? I mean, you kind of want that 30 touchdown guy. That's right. I mean, I get the differential hasn't changed much, going from 4 to 4, and then 1 for an interception, 4 for a touchdown. But the 6-2, I just think it was so much better. So I think those things all mattered. I don't know, but I love the fact that every league is slightly different. Like there are some leagues that just heavily tweaked defenses where it's all of a sudden it's in play, and maybe tight ends get tweaked, and this one's half PPR, this one's PPR. So it's just, there's no one solution that just cracks it, which I think is good. It keeps debate, keeps people thinking. I think the worst scenario would be, this is the scoring system, we're all going to use it, these are the rules, we're all going to use them, and no deviation. Kind of like what roto baseball was for all those years. Just it's awful. It's like, okay, it's cracked, we know exactly how much everybody's worth, this is just play out the simulation. Oh, you won, awesome.
There's 2 things that I think of on that. It's kind of like going to the ice cream store, right? Everybody likes their different flavor, just like they like their different type of fantasy football. The other thing that I think one of the up and coming, and we probably are past it in the fantasy football world, is some kind of game simulator that, kind of a Madden type deal where we play this game a million times, and now let's look at those range of outcomes for these players.
Right.
IBM wants.
I think the DFS players are constantly kind of doing that.
Right.
They're kind of approaching it like that. Like, this is what this looks like. Here's the range of outcomes. Now you take a range of outcomes against, a 50, 60 player pool of guys that I think are good values this week. Now literally just run simulations based on that variable of each of those players scoring, and optimize after each one of those configurations. Do that 10,000 times and tell me 150 rosters that won't be that well owned that also fit into my criteria of how I'm building my team. I mean, it's cool. I mean, that's its own game, I guess. That's almost too far for my thing. I mean, I hate that it gets to the AI guys. Like, I think the guillotine is one of the funnest formats right now, because there's literally hasn't been much written on the subject. Now, hopefully, maybe in the years to come, I'll change that. But I think I've honestly figured out how to crack it. Like, this is only my 2nd guillotine, I got in the playoffs the first year. I expect to get in the playoffs this year. I think we're down to 6 teams now. The one that Paul's done kind of with a bunch of league experts, but I think I've cracked it. Like, I think I absolutely have an absolute formula. We'll probably release a spreadsheet soon that literally just says, here is how I'd approach every single guillotine, like how much I'd use my cap, how I would use rest of the season in a whole bidding strategy, of how much to cap off that every week to kind of attack it, to attack every single waiver period to keep grinding up a better team. But I think that's what's cool. It's like, here's a new format. A couple of years later, people start thinking, how do we beat this? And then we start discussing it. And then somebody says, well, it was kind of right, but I think it's this. And then you start discussing that. And that's kind of how we've got to this point on virtually every other aspect of the game. I think that's fantastic.
A bunch of smart people in the room, and they'll try to figure out how to maximize it.
Correct. Absolutely. 100%. I mean, that's a given. So
You mentioned scoring, like the 4-point to 6-point touchdowns for quarterbacks.
right.
Passing touchdowns are worth the same amount of real points as rushing or receiving touchdowns. They should be valued the same. I think that there should be a bigger. I think they should dock more points per interception than just 2, because interceptions are game changers.
Correct.
They've probably swayed momentum in quite a few more games than the average person would expect.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think it was one of those things where it's like, you start going, 6 and -4, and then there's like some guys like, wow, my quarterback got me negative points. I mean, everybody starts fearing that negative point thing. That's real. I mean, if you've ever had, when your guy is just like, okay, this is not going well, right? I mean, so turnovers between interceptions and fumbles, you start docking. I mean, I've been in leagues like that. It's like, It's no fun getting negative points from people. No fun getting negative points from your defense either. It's like gave up too many points, gave up too many. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, there's been so many attempts. I know doesn't even like Scott Fish with all the fishbowl stuff. I mean, he does everything to try to neutralize, make the positions almost all equal. But there's been a lot of efforts in that regard. Sometimes, I mean, you can get carried away when it becomes so crazy. Like I remember one time at this fantasy FSTA, Fantasy Sports Trade Association. This guy thought he had the most ingenious thing, and it included punters and offensive linemen. It's like, and I said to him, I took him off the room. He makes this big pitch. He thinks he's got the world saver. I'm just going, I'm telling you right now, man, most people, like me included, can't name more than like 6 or 7 punters.
Right.
Like most of us don't really know the offensive. Like we know the unit is pretty good, and we know the key left tackle and sometimes the right tackle if they run on that side. And like if you show me a list of guys, like I kind of know they're on that team, but I don't really spend a lot of time with it, except their cohesion and how well they're playing and how well that unit plays in front of them. I just said, I write about this stuff every day, and I don't know the punters. Like, how many people do you think you're going to get to play in a league where you've got to actually physically rank the punters? Like, dude, you're losing. I mean, there aren't enough people to play IDP leagues as it is, right? Yes. I mean, people just like, and IDP, these are like stars that are tackling and intercepting. But I think the reality is it's got to be a friendly enough game where the casual person can still play, maybe not win, but can still play and be somewhat competitive, or you've lost everything. And it's the reason I do think things like Superflex, they include more quarterbacks where they're all household names, make sense. Whereas super complex scoring systems that favors, a wide receiver 5 on a team because of some bizarro rule, well, he got this many points on so few targets, that's worth so many points. Like, that's just crap, dude. Nobody cares about that. Like, did he score? Did he get a lot of yards? That's what people can understand. So I think at some point, I've seen it all. Like, everybody thinks they've got the master formula, but we've got to these set of rules. They're pretty close. But I do think there'll always be innovation kind of within this stuff. And I think we keep seeing it. I mean, it's fun to watch.
What you were saying about AI reminds me of a quote I read in a book this year in English class. Perfection is the ultimate boredom. And with AI,
right.
That's what could happen.
Right. I mean, it's like, oh, Jeff Tefferkiller is going against David Dory. It's like, oh, it's the Huddle's AI against football guys' AI. They both press the button. They're locked in. I mean, it's like, how boring is that, right? Like, no, you want to actually think and have to make your decision. And it's like, and it's great when there's like 4 players that, man, I don't really know who to play at flex. These are all pretty close. That's perfect. I mean, that's what makes it fun, right? I mean, if it was super easy, there's no joy in it. But yeah, I think it's still based on trying to project for what hasn't happened yet. So I mean,
Yeah.
there's no way anybody's truly going to crack it. But I do worry a bit when the AI dominates the discussion elements. That's never should have been the point, right? Use the analytics to get smarter, try to have better projections, have better models, but allow the debate, right? I'm like, yeah, but you're not factoring in he played against this scrub and this happened, right? I mean, there's always something that changed from last week to this week, right? That doesn't, your data doesn't really represent that data. I've got this data to show you. And I think that's what makes it fun, is because it's not exact. Like, you don't exactly know. Well, dude, you do the matchups, and Carolina was giving up tons of run yards, and here you got an aging, not saying I like playing older players, but you got an aging Adrian Peterson playing them this week with DeAndre Swift out. Perfect smash spot, 18 yards on something like 9 or 10 carries or something, right? 10 carries, 18 yards, just got completely smashed. It's like, okay, there's the real game of football, right? Didn't see that entirely coming, right? I mean, it seemed like a spot where you could pick this guy up and do something with him, and nope, you could drop him again. That was bad, right? So, but
the Panthers did that earlier in the year. Can you trade?
Right? And it's like, well, people say you should have saw it coming. It was old. It's like, yeah, I get it, man. I mean, I get it. There's always another set of data that you should have looked at in hindsight. But I think that's what makes it fun, and no different than, I mean, you saw Twitter just ready to just say how bad Taysom Hill was going to be, right? Taysom Hill's going to be awful. He's throwing 10 passes lifetime. He's about ready. I mean, I think even our buddy Chase was saying he's about ready to pass Mohamed Sanu on the passing yards chart, right? Receiver. It's like, yeah, dude, we get it. He's never thrown the ball. But I mean, they've seen this kid play for 2+ years, signed him to a giant deal knowing Breeze is gone. I think they know he can play, right? And at some point, it's like, I'm not saying all coaches, all head front offices are the same, but New Orleans is a pretty successful one. I usually like to give the benefit of the doubt. Let's watch them play. I think now we watch them play. Now is anybody saying that? Now, again, admittedly, Atlanta's got wings. I mean, you always can find reasons. He looked pretty sharp out there. He didn't even look like he was trying to run. He just looked like he stayed in the pocket, executed the offense pretty effectively. So now we got a small sample of work. Pretty soon we'll have a bigger sample of work, and you kind of work on that. But I find it hilarious. Like, everybody's the genius. Taysom Hill on a dumb contract, and then same thing with PJ Walker. It's like,
right.
Well, he wasn't good enough to be in the NFL and get drafted. He's going to get just killed. Oh, damn, he looked pretty good out there. It's like, I mean, some of these coaches probably know what the hell they're doing. They see these players every day. Like, if they're not any good, they get cut. I mean, it's the fact that they're on an NFL depth chart, they're probably pretty good.
Well, you mentioned PJ Walker. His 2 interceptions were in the end zone. So if those 2 were turned into touchdowns, he has a 275-yard 3-touchdown day. Yeah, no interceptions. Doubt. Everybody's going to go bonkers.
Correct. No, I agree. That one of those was like, ooh, you kind of cringe when he threw it though.
Yeah.
That was what we were fearing of right there, was a little more knowledge base on how people are defending this. You probably don't throw that pass, but that's just it. I mean, but I think at this level, we constantly see it at the running back position, right? All of a sudden somebody gets hurt and some new kid comes up that, doesn't have a great draft pedigree, and he just crushes it. It's like
Mike Davis.
Yeah, well, and Mike Davis, a perfect example. I mean, he's been bounced around, but he flashed a few other times in other spots too, but not to the point. I mean, no one's thinking, oh, he's the next thing. But what you saw a coach and a system put in for McCaffrey, that all of a sudden McCaffrey's out. This guy was doing all the homework and notes and watching what the other cat was doing. And then now all of a sudden he's put in a situation where, because he did the film study, because maybe he doesn't have the pedigree, but man, those plays are set up to succeed. And he did, until they started realizing, okay, let's just start stacking it up against the guy. Wow, he's not Christian McCaffrey. And then he had some bad games, right? And then and maybe the defense loosens up because the receivers are thriving, right? And it is a cat and mouse game. But I find it hilarious. Like the Twitter universe they hated Taysom Hill. And it's like, they were just completely silent after like yesterday's performance, because he crushed. I mean, and he didn't take out and start running every down. That's what everybody thinks. Oh, he's going to throw it 10 times. He's going to run every down. It's just running the wishbone. It's like, I didn't see really any of that. He ran for the touchdown just like he always does when he's inside the 5, but he just stayed in the pocket and threw the ball all day long, right?
Yeah.
And he's got Michael Thomas, dude. You don't got he's got Alvin Kamara. You don't really got to get fancy. You got to just be okay, right?
Yeah.
So,
There's a couple of the two things that we say often on this show is the world is defined on spectrum. There's no reason to have like super hard convictions about probabilities. These are possibilities and probabilities, not likelihoods. And so take like an Antonio Gibson that many people were they're cautious of because he's already had more carries in the NFL than he had in college.
Correct. Right. He didn't have a pedigree as a full-time back. He's kind of an undersized guy.
He's playing running back for a bad team.
Correct. On a team that, right, you wouldn't expect the pound of the clock. And then he's one of these slash hybrid players where, like, we've seen a bunch of them. The Percy Harvins, the Curtis Samuels, like, is he a receiver? Is he a running back? He's undersized. But yeah, at the end of the day, Duke can ball, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, gotta keep that guy in the field, right? I mean, you see it enough, and now it's obvious. Yeah, and everybody was on him originally. Of course, their take's 100% right. It's like it probably wasn't right either, but yeah, he got himself in a situation, and he's done great in it. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the one that kills me, and I'm the biggest Charger fan in the world, but I didn't really see Justin Herbert coming, like not to this level, like. I mean, he's making throws, and like I'm just like, wow, there's not many people in the league to make that throw and see it as fast as he's seeing and processing it and getting to his third read. It's amazing. It's like you watch, it's like Patrick Mahomes. I think a lot of us did expect to see it when he got on the field. We saw it. We saw it a lot of times, but Justin Herbert, I didn't expect it to be this smooth and this, and I think Kyler Murray is similar. I mean, I think we saw flashes of it in college, but receivers are way wider open and pretty undersized. And it's funny because you always said pretty quick, but he don't look very fast. He's not outrunning anybody. And now it's like his processing. That's what I see this year. This evolution this year isn't his skill set hasn't changed all that much. He's still making most of those same throws, but his processing to where to go and how to be and his whole rhythm and timing of the rush and everything, it's just wow. Like if this is year 2, like where does this guy end up, right? I mean, this is crazy. We're watching greatness unfold before our eyes. It's fun to watch.
Oh yeah. And I'm probably one of the bigger Taysom Hill detractors on the staff. I still think that there's still some downside risk, but part of the let me say weakness of my thought was I didn't give Sean Payton enough credit, right? You know what I mean? Like Sean Payton, for what he did to Teddy Bridgewater, we all should have taken note and said, I think that guy knows how to coach quarterbacks. I think that guy knows how to call the plays for his quarterback to be successful.
Well, and think of what he's done with Taysom Hill too. Like take the long view of this. He's got Drew Brees. Every year it's like give him a whole bunch of boatload more money to go another year. You never really know when that's going to end, right? I mean, it's not that Drew's I have to get this and holding it hostage. You just don't know when Drew wants to call it quits, right? And how that's going to work. So he's consistently just given Taysom more and more roles. Okay, now we got the 5-yard package. Now we got you're split out. You do this. You do some weird wishbone stuff. We're doing special teams. He just keeps giving that guy more and more and more stuff to process. So the reality is, I mean, we really shouldn't be shocked. I mean, he was giving him all of these different looks, all while still teaching the passing game that none of us got to see. It shouldn't really come as a giant shock. I mean, he's not going to be Drew Brees. No one's as accurate as Drew Brees, but he has all of these other things. And it doesn't take much to look around the league and realize the Kyler Murrays and the Deshaun Watson, the Patrick Mahomes. It's like, you want a running quarterback. I mean, this game has evolved. Like the days of having Tom Brady, it's like, yeah, there's always an exception, but it's like the guy just sits there and gets pounded. I mean, eventually his line isn't good enough and it's over, right? I mean, we're watching, like, what did we just see in Burrow? It was awful to watch. You knew it was coming, and it's like, I don't say, but it's like there was no offensive line to protect this guy, and Burrow actually can move around a decent amount. But when you have no protection, you have to have a guy that can move, or they're just going to get creamed. And but I think you see Taysom Hill, and it's like, I don't know. I mean, in some ways, I get it how accurate Drew Brees is, but I think I'd be more fearful in facing a Taysom Hill. Just does more stuff. It's like Lamar Jackson. Like, do you really want to face Lamar Jackson? It's like, do you really have an exact package to take everything away from that guy? Like, if today is the day he wants to run wild on you, he's going to run wild on you, right? Now, I mean, again, they've had some offensive line woes. They've had a few things, and that's not the great team that we saw last year. But they were like, everybody saw what they were doing, just gashing them on the run every play, and no one could stop it. What do you do?
Yeah.
What do you do for Patrick Mahomes right now? Like, how do you defend that? Do you double team? Which player do you double team? Tyree? Do you double team the tight end? Do you double? Like, how do you take it? What do you take away from that team? Do you blitz them? Because I haven't seen that work. He backpedals faster than most people run. So I don't know. I mean, I think what you do is you do what New England's done all the years that sometimes beat them, is you disguise. It looks like you're in cover 2, and dude, you bounced out. Your man, you just constantly are juggling what his pre-snap looks like to what it actually is on the field, and just hope somewhere along the line one of his receivers takes a kind of wrong step, something gets tipped, just some mistake happens, whether it's on Patrick Mahomes or not, that keeps you in the game. Keep everything in front of you. Don't let Tyree get behind you. But I don't know. I mean, I think sometimes, like, the game favors the offense. You know where the ball's going to go, right? So, like, you know, but you see these dynamic players, and I think Taysom's one of those guys. Like, I think all of us will see and go, wow, he's not Drew Brees. Well, that's pretty much a given. But I think there'll be a day when Taysom Hill runs for 85 yards and you're realizing, wow, this guy kind of has a lot of other skills too, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you saw that thing floating on Twitter, and I laughed about it, but it basically had, you know, and somebody says, oh, it looks like Christian McCaffrey's a poor man's Taysom Hill. And the comment was that because Taysom Hill had a faster 40 time, had a bigger broad jump time, his metrics were all better than Christian McCaffrey's. It's just funny. I mean, that's how much of an athlete this guy is. And I think, don't undersell that. I mean, it's still a very athletic game. Guys like Taysom Hill with really, really good coaching on how to get the other players involved. And then it helps when you've got Kamara, when you have Michael Thomas. You got guys that are going to be open, right? You don't have to do too much. They're going to be open. You throw that where it's supposed to be, and everybody wins.
Oh, yeah. So Dave, we appreciate your time. As we wrap up, Rhys, you have a final question for David?
So, we talked about the contest, the playoff contest for football guys.
Right.
And a big part of that is predicting who's going to go to conference finals and Super Bowl. Who are your predictions for each?
I mean, I think Kansas City's the best of probably the AFC. I think that's probably a given, right? I mean, I'm trying to think, like, who else could even fight with Kansas City. I mean, it's funny, the Raiders have not, I would say, Oakland. Las Vegas actually has played them twice now in a row, but it seems like Kansas City for sure on that side. Man, the NFC seems like kind of a grab bag, doesn't it? I mean, it's probably Tampa Bay. You have to look and say the offense should be outstanding, right? I mean, there's so many pieces there that should work, and on paper that defense should work, right? And we've seen both sides of that break down, but I think when it's all said and done, they'll probably be those will probably be the two. But that's probably the most likely Super Bowl for most people as well. I can't imagine anybody from the NFC East getting there. Right? Wouldn't that just be something, though? A team that wins, like, 4 or 5 games, whatever, somehow makes the playoffs and goes on this tear, and they're in the people would be so disappointed. But
that'd be awesome, though.
Blooper Bowl.
Yeah, but there's Seattle and Green Bay and Pittsburgh and
there are, and I think New Orleans too. I think we've seen, like, when New Orleans defense plays up to what it can do, their offense definitely has been missing some pieces, but I think if that all gels, I mean, New Orleans on paper should be one of the better teams. I feel like Green Bay is going to let us down. I'm not sure exactly why. They played pretty well. Who on the AFC do you guys like other than Kansas City? It seems like Pittsburgh for sure. Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, Chase Claypool's the difference maker there, I think, and that they now have 3 receivers. They have a whole complement of backs, depending on situation, and their defense is just second to none. So, I mean, usually a good defense and a running game with a suitable quarterback. If Roethlisberger ever goes down, that team's done. Though we saw what that looks like. But yeah, with 3 good receivers, you're right. I mean, Pittsburgh might even be better than Kansas City. They at least have all phases of the game. When it's all said and done, you kind of saw it like last night. I mean, a team plays Kansas City perfectly, and still it's like, okay, you're going to give the ball back to the guy. I mean, unless you just run out the clock holding the ball. Like, I just don't, you're not going to win. The second you give it back to Patrick Mahomes, you scored in what, 30 seconds?
Yeah. Pretty close.
Right? I mean, it was like, just walk right down the field. It's like, I mean, again, there was kind of a blown coverage, but it's like, that just always seems to happen against that team. Like, if he has the ball, give him a minute, it's over. You're not going to beat him.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I think the kind of team that's going to beat Kansas City if they beat them is going to be what Tennessee did that one game. They still didn't beat them, but basically just ran. You just chew up the clock, hold your drives as long as possible, and minimize the amount of times he gets to touch the ball.
Carolina did that very well.
Correct. I mean, that's the secret, but good luck. I mean, use your own team can't run that often without your line just getting hurt and sore and all those things as well. So I don't know, but yeah, for whatever the reason, it seems like the Raiders match up extremely well with that team, but no one else. So okay, man.
Hey, thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it, David.
Always. And you're the future, man. Never letting me distract from your visions and thoughts, and just keep hammering, man.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Have a
Bye.
good one.